Algarve Portugal is world-renowned for its dramatic golden cliffs, hidden sandy beaches, turquoise Atlantic water, and some of the most famous sea caves in Europe. It is especially known for Benagil Cave, one of the most photographed places in Portugal. But after seeing so many perfect images online, I wanted to experience the real Algarve on a day trip from Lisbon and see whether it actually feels as magical in person. By the end of this video, I will show you my full route through Benagil Beach, Faro, and Portimao, how much I really spent, what surprised me, what felt too crowded, and whether this part of Portugal Algarve is truly worth adding to your Portugal travel itinerary. On the fifth and final day of our Portugal travel vlog, we left Lisbon early in the morning and started driving toward the Algarve region. We followed the A2 motorway and then continued through the connecting roads toward the Algarve coast. After around 3 hours on the road, we arrived at our first stop, Benagil Beach. Our plan was to join a 45 minutes Benagil Cave Portugal boat tour, which we had booked in advance from getyourguide.com for around €20 per person. For people joining this tour by car, there was a free parking area around 4 or 5 minutes walking distance from the beach, so we parked there and started walking downhill toward Benagil Beach. As soon as we started walking down, the first thing I noticed was the number of tourist groups heading toward the beach. And as we got closer, I also noticed restaurants, cafes, and boutique hotel-style places built into the slopes around the area. This was the first moment I realized that Benagil is no longer just a hidden coastal spot. It has become one of the most popular Algarve places to visit. When we reached the beach area, the atmosphere became much busier and more intense than I expected. There were water sports ticket cabins, boat tour operators, and a serious crowd of people everywhere. Inside the beach, there were hundreds of visitors waiting for kayak rentals, paddleboarding tours, sunbathing, swimming, or just trying to get into the sea. This is where you really understand how popular Benagil Beach has become. Online, this area often looks peaceful, empty, and almost untouched. But in reality, during the busy season, it can feel extremely crowded. Before our boat tour started, we still had a little time, so we walked around the beach and watched the whole scene. There were people carrying kayaks, tourists taking photos, boat staff calling their groups, and swimmers trying to enjoy the water between all the activity. Honestly, this was one of the first real lessons of the day. Benagil is beautiful, but if you come expecting a quiet secret beach experience, you may be disappointed. After a short wait, our boat came back from its previous tour and approached the shore. We boarded the boat for our 45 minutes journey along the Benagil Caves and the surrounding coastline. The staff handed out life jackets for safety, and then we were ready to start the tour. Even though some of the smaller caves do not have clearly separate names, I will try to describe each place we visited along the way. Our first cave was just to the left side of Benagil Beach when looking from the sea. It was a cave that boats, kayaks, and people doing water sports could easily enter. After the captain gave us some information, we quickly continued toward the second stop. And this second stop was the main reason why most people come here, the real Benagil Cave. At this point, the tour already felt exciting, but I was also curious to see whether Benagil Cave would feel peaceful and magical, or whether the crowds outside would continue inside as well. Benagil Cave is probably the most famous landmark of this entire coastline and one of the classic cover photos of Portugal travel. When we arrived in front of the cave, there were luxury yachts waiting outside and several boats slowly moving toward the entrance. We approached carefully and waited for our turn. After a very short wait, we entered the cave and the view inside was genuinely impressive. The circular opening at the top, the light coming through, the sandy floor, the rock walls, and the turquoise water really create a unique scene. The boat staff helped every guest take photos in front of this famous view. But I have to be honest, the time inside the cave was very short. You enter, you look around, you take a quick photo, and then you leave because there are so many other boats waiting outside. So yes, Benagil Cave is beautiful, and I am glad I saw it, but the experience is also very controlled, very fast, and very crowded. I was impressed and slightly disappointed at the same time. Impressed by the natural beauty, but disappointed by how quickly the moment passed. That does not mean it is not worth seeing. but it is very important to have realistic expectations before you visit. After leaving Benagil Cave, we continued past the kayakers and moved along the coast in front of Arco da Praia da Corredora. Soon after passing the beach, we entered another low cave where we had to bend our heads slightly as the boat went inside. This cave was lower at the entrance but went deeper inside, and there were kayakers resting and cooling down in the shade. Right after that, we entered another cave with a similar style. Again, you could clearly see how kayaking is one of the most popular activities in this area. If you are looking for Algarve things to do, kayaking around Benagil can be more adventurous than a boat tour, but it also requires more time, more effort, and a bit more patience with the crowds. After a short ride, we reached the area around Gruta dos Algarinhos, a natural sea arch and rock formation. From the boat, we could not see every detail perfectly, but the coastline was still very scenic. There was also a rock formation above us that looked a bit like a crocodile. Because I had seen a similar formation in Malta, I joked with the captain that maybe these shapes were not completely natural and maybe someone had helped shape them a little. That created a funny moment inside the boat and made the tour feel more personal. These small moments are exactly why I like joining local tours, because even in a very touristy place, one small conversation can make the experience feel more memorable. Eventually, we arrived at one of the other major landmarks of this route, Arcos Naturais da Praia da Mesquita. These sea arches and rock formations looked almost like a movie scene in the middle of the water. This is one of those places where you really feel the power of the Algarve coast. Right next to this area is Praia da Marina, one of the most famous Algarve beaches and one of the most visited beaches in the region during the season. This part of the boat tour gave us some of the best coastal views of the day. If you love dramatic cliffs, natural arches, sea caves and Portugal beaches, this coastline is definitely one of the most impressive areas in the country. After this stop, our captain started driving at full speed back toward Benagil Beach. And just before reaching the beach, he showed off his skills a little to give us a small adrenaline moment. As we got closer to the shore, we noticed that the crowd on the beach had almost doubled compared to 45 minutes earlier. At that point, some of the kayakers were so close to each other that their paddles were almost hitting, and many of them could barely move forward. This was probably the strongest expectation versus reality moment of the whole Benagil experience. After the tour, we bought cold drinks from the cafe to cool down a little and then walked back to the car. Our next stop in the Faro Algarve area was Faro itself. After a 50 minutes drive from Benagil Beach, we arrived in Faro around 12 noon. We parked our car near the Marina and paid around €5 for 3 hours of parking. The first monument we saw in the center was Monumento a Ferreira de Almeida, which has historical importance for the city. At first glance, Faro looked clean, organized, and calmer than I expected. I also noticed that bicycles and motorcycles were very common in the city. There seemed to be more traffic than people walking around, and I think one reason was the midday heat, because many visitors were probably at the beach during that time. From there, we started walking along Rua da Marinha toward the central streets of Faro. The streets were covered with classic Portuguese pavement mosaics, and there were souvenir shops, cafes, and stores on both sides. In some streets, fabric shades were installed above the road to create shadow during the hot summer months. When we reached Rua de Santo Antonio, the quality of the shops increased, and even though it was not very crowded, it was clear that this was one of the liveliest shopping streets in the city. For anyone searching for things to do in Faro, Portugal, this central walking area is a good place to start, especially if you want a softer and more local contrast after the intense crowds of Benagil Beach. After the morning Benagil adventure, the long drive, and walking through Faro streets in the heat, we were really hungry. So we started looking for a place to have lunch, but some restaurants were closed at that time. Eventually, we found a small and charming restaurant called Ado Pinto. They served local Portuguese dishes, including cataplana and beef stew style meals. We paid around €20 per person for a nice mid-range lunch. This was not the cheapest option in Faro, but the food was good, the atmosphere felt local, and it gave us a proper break after a very active morning. If you are traveling on a tighter budget, you can find simple lunch options in Faro for around €10. But for a more comfortable mid-range lunch, I would say 15 to 20 euros per person is a realistic expectation. For coffee lovers, espresso in Faro can be as low as 0.6 to 0.8 euros, while more specialized coffees are usually around 2 euros. This is one of the reasons why Faro, Portugal still feels quite reasonable compared with many other European destinations, especially if you are careful with restaurants and do not eat in the most touristy spots every time. After lunch, we continued walking through Faro to discover different parts of the city. On the way, we passed a street with some buildings that looked abandoned, and that gave us the feeling that we were getting closer to the older part of the city. A little further ahead, we passed by a cafe and suddenly saw Palacete Belmarzo, one of the city's most impressive buildings. Right opposite it, the Brazilian consulate building also stood out with its historic architecture and corner position. As we continued to the right, the walled old town started to appear. In the small park in front of the old town, there were azulejo tile panels showing a part of the city's history. Next to the old town, there was also a large parking area and a green space with trees. Around this area, many houses had different sizes, colors, and architectural details, which gave Faro a richer and more layered look. Then we entered the old town through Arco do Repuso, passing between a few tourists. As soon as we entered, we found ourselves in a yellow-toned street with a restaurant that had typical Portuguese architectural details. Then we arrived at Praça de D. Afonso III, where the statue of Dom Afonso III stands. This square is also home to Museu Municipal de Faro, one of the important museums of the city. A little further on, there were restaurants on both sides of the street. After a short walk, we noticed street art pieces on the walls inside the old town. Then the Catedral de Faro appeared with its architecture that matched the historic character of the city. Right across from it was Paço Episcopal de Faro, another striking building in the old town. Our last major stop in the old town was Câmara Municipal de Faro, one of the important public buildings of the city. For anyone watching this as a Faro Portugal travel guide, I would say the old town is the most atmospheric part of the city. And this is where Faro starts to feel less like just a gateway to the Algarve and more like a historic Portuguese city worth walking through. After walking a little more through the old town streets, we exited toward the city center through the historic Porta Árabe. As soon as we came out, Igreja da Misericordia stood right in front of us. When we turned around, we could see Arco da Vila on the outside of the gate, which is one of the symbolic landmarks of Faro. Then we walked through Jardim Manuel Bivar, the central park of the city. At the end of the park, the cone-shaped architecture of Caixa Geral de Depósitos on our right side caught my attention. After that, we continued along Rua Conselheiro Bivar, another lively street in the center. The narrow side streets and arched passages gave the area a lot of character. There were many cafes and restaurants along the way, which showed that Faro has a good gastronomic side as well. We also spent a little time in a souvenir shop on one of the main vehicle access streets of the city. For people who want to stay in this area, AP Eva Senses Hotel in front of the Marina looked like one of the more elegant and centrally located hotels in Faro. Near the Marina, there were also small tour office stands where visitors could book Benagil Cave tours or other regional experiences. After one final walk along the Marina, we returned to our car and completed our almost 4-hour visit to Faro. If you are searching for things to do in Faro, I would not say it is as visually dramatic as the Algarve coastline, but it is clean, walkable, historic, and a very nice contrast after the busy Benagil area. For me, Faro worked best as a relaxed cultural stop rather than a high adrenaline sightseeing destination. Before our return flight from Lisbon airport, we still had some time left, so we decided to drive from Faro to Portimao. After around 1 hour on the road, we arrived in Portimao at around 4 in the afternoon. We parked the car in a central area for around 2 euros and started walking through the colorful streets of the city. The difference from Faro was noticeable. The building facades and street textures felt more varied and more colorful. There were also many restaurants and cafes, which made the area feel lively. We walked through some of the smaller side streets and slowly made our way toward the waterfront. On the way, we passed a small park and a building that looked like it might be a museum. After a short walk, we reached the waterfront area. We took a brief walk by the water, then stopped at a cafe to rest and cool down a little. Portimao, Portugal felt like a place that deserves more time than we had, especially if you want to explore the coast, nearby beaches, or stay overnight. But for us, this was just a short final stop before ending our 5-day Portugal travel adventure. Around 5, we started driving back toward Lisbon. We arrived at Lisbon airport around 8, returned the rental car, and entered the airport for our 2 long flights back to Cyprus. Looking back, Portimao was the part of the day where I felt we were only getting a quick preview, not the full experience. So if you are planning a slower Algarve itinerary, this is one place I would not rush. Now let me quickly summarize what we actually spent during this Algarve travel vlog. We were 3 people and we rented a car for around 60 euros per day. For this Algarve day trip, we used around 80 euros of fuel. So our transportation cost came to around 45 euros per person. The Benagil Cave boat tour from Benagil Beach cost around 20 euros per person. Parking near Benagil Beach was free because we used the tour parking area. In Faro, we paid around 5 euros for 3 hours of parking near the Marina. Our lunch at Adu Pinto in Faro cost around 20 euros per person. In Portimao, we paid around 2 euros for parking. So for my personal day, excluding small drinks and coffees, the rough cost was around 90 euros per person. This included car rental share, fuel share, the Benagil boat tour, parking, and a proper mid-range lunch. If you add cold drinks, coffee, snacks, or extra activities, it can easily go a little above that. For a full day covering Benagil, Faro, and Portimao by car, I think this was a reasonable but not extremely cheap day. The biggest advantage of the car was flexibility, because we could move from Lisbon to Benagil Beach, then Faro, then Portimao, and finally back to Lisbon airport on our own schedule. But if you are only one person, or if you do not want to drive that much in one day, the car may not always be the cheapest or easiest option. If you want to visit this area with a lower budget, you have a few different options. From Lisbon to Faro, Flixbus tickets can be around 20 euros round trip if you book well and find good timings. This can be the cheapest way to reach Faro, but it gives you less flexibility to visit Benagil Beach, Praia da Marinha, or Portimao in the same day. From Lisbon, 12 hours Algarve plus Benagil Cave tours usually cost around 90 to 120 euros per person. This can be easier if you do not want to rent a car, plan the roads, or deal with parking. From Faro, Benagil Cave tours are usually around 50 to 60 euros, depending on the operator and the exact route. If you are already staying in Faro Algarve, this can be a practical way to see the caves without driving from Lisbon. At Benagil Beach, kayak rentals are usually around 25 to 35 euros for 1.5 to 2 hours. Kayaking can feel more adventurous than a boat tour, but during peak season, the water traffic can be intense. For food, a budget-friendly lunch in Faro can be around 10 euros. A mid-range lunch is more likely around 15 to 20 euros. Espresso can be around 0.6 to 0.8 euros, and specialized coffees are usually around 2 euros. So if you are careful, you can visit Faro on a lower budget. But if you want to include Benagil Caves, transportation, food, and activities, the total cost rises quickly. My honest advice is this: if you only want to see Faro, public transport can make sense, but if you want to combine Benagil Beach, the Algarve Coast, Faro, and Portimao in one day, having a car or joining an organized tour will make the day much easier. So, is the Algarve worth visiting on a day trip from Lisbon? For me, yes, but with some important expectations. The coastline is genuinely beautiful, and the combination of Benagil Cave, sea arches, turquoise water, and dramatic cliffs makes this one of the most memorable coastal regions in Portugal. But I also think the Benagil area can feel too crowded, especially if you come during peak season and later in the morning. If your dream is a peaceful hidden cave experience, you might be disappointed. But if you understand that it is a very popular place and you still want to see one of the most iconic natural landmarks in Portugal, then it is definitely worth doing once. Faro was a nice surprise for me because it felt clean, historic, walkable, and more local than I expected. Portimao felt more colorful and lively, but because we only had a short time there, I would not say we fully experienced it. If I did this route again, I would either start even earlier or stay one night in the Algarve instead of trying to fit everything into one day. If you have more time, I think the better plan is to spend at least 2 or 3 days in the region and explore more Algarve beaches, coastal viewpoints, and smaller towns without rushing. But if you only have one extra day during your Portugal trip, then a day trip like this can still give you a powerful first taste of the Algarve. My final honest opinion is simple. Benagil gives you the wow factor, Faro gives you the culture and walkability, and Portimao gives you the feeling that there is much more to explore if you stay longer. That was our Algarve day trip from Lisbon, including Benagil Beach, the Benagil Caves, Faro, and a short stop in Portimao. If you are planning your own Portugal travel route, I hope this video helped you understand the real costs, the crowds, the route, and what to expect from this beautiful but very popular region. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to Algarve Travels, share it with someone planning a Portugal trip, and watch my other videos from the Portugal Travel series for more honest travel guides, real costs, mistakes to avoid, and practical itineraries.